Good, we're streaming live. Excellent. We do have a quorum, and it is almost 10 after. So while we're waiting for, I don't want to take up any more time waiting for Adriana to join. I just sent her the link, so she should have it. I want to welcome everybody to this evening's Board of Zoning Appeals. Recording is now in progress, and I believe we are also live streaming on YouTube. It is Wednesday, January 12th. My name is Martin Daly. For those who don't know me, I'm a longtime board member, and I'm now the chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I do want to say now we're on the record, say a brief thank you to Richard for shepherding us these past number of years. I think he reached the end of his second term, so he decided to step down. So I do want to thank him for leading us in our proceedings previously. And bear with me, there may be a bump in the road as we move forward, but I know staff is here to keep me in line, so I appreciate that. We have a very full agenda for this evening. Oh, hi, Adriana. We do have a full house. We have all 5 members here, so great. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be in 2 parts tonight. The first part is a public workshop agenda, and the second part is our public hearing agenda. And for those folks who have not joined us before, we kind of do a little bit of different run of show for these types of workshop versus public hearing. Our workshop is an opportunity for staff to advise the board on the applications. We'll go through each of the applications that are proposed for the workshop agenda. For this case, we just have the one. And it's an opportunity for the board to make sure that we have a complete application before it goes to a public hearing. So it's more of a finding of fact or an identifying of areas we need to know more about a particular application to make sure we have all of the material we may need to make our decision or to have a good public record for when a project goes to a public hearing. And at that point, we'll have the applicant present or any members of the public speak for or against or be able to provide more information for that particular project. We have one project on the public workshop agenda. From that, we will enter into the public hearing agenda, and that will be an opportunity for us to review cases, for the applicants to present on the case, and then certainly we'll have public comment for each of those items. For any of our cases, I know that staff has set up ways for the public to send in comments. For some of our cases, we do have a lot of comments coming in, and I know that there has been some communication to staff that not all those comments have been archived as of yet on the city website. So please be patient. It takes time to take the comment and be able to review it and put it on the website. And so we do appreciate that you're sending comments in for these cases. They will certainly be part of the record. And if there's anything that the public wants to respond tonight that they're not able to do to communicate in person, please send us comments. We'll certainly be able to provide them as part of the public record for the cases. So with that, why don't we dive into our first case, which is project 00450, requesting 3 area variances. And that is for, the applicant is North American Islamic Trust, and the address is 276 Central Avenue.
So this one came in to kind of redo an existing structure, 276 Central Avenue. And a couple of, or 3 variances will be required going forward, plus a demolition review. So that has gone before the planning board. What we are looking at is the demolition reconstruction of the existing front area of the building, extending the prayer hall, and adding an elevator, an additional exit staircase. So here's the project location. It's zone mixed-use form-based Central Avenue. As you can see here, these slides were submitted by the applicant, providing vital service to the surrounding community. So here's the overhead, the existing structure. So the first the first section of the ordinance that they're requesting a variance from is regarding building materials, that all building materials shall be retained in their original state to the maximum extent feasible. And then to the window and door arrangements, those are intended to be maintained in their original state to the maximum extent feasible. And the roof shape is also supposed to be maintained to the maximum extent feasible. So those are the three variances that they are requesting. So going through the criteria, whether an undesirable change will be produced as a detriment to the character of the neighborhood. So this was the response, that the proposed front elevation is compatible and in harmony with the surrounding buildings for this use, and that it enhances the neighborhood as well as the community. So here's what the front elevation looks like. So it's a pretty substantial addition to the existing facade. So here's some pictures from the surrounding area that were submitted, kind of showing that the front facade of the proposed addition is in character with the surrounding neighborhood. The second criteria, whether the benefit could have been achieved by another method, and what was submitted was that the existing structure will not serve the present need, and that there was a fire that damaged the portion of the structure, and that the structure has deteriorated substantially. Criteria 3, whether the area variance is substantial. The applicant responded that the variance is not substantial, and that the proposed front elevation is compatible and in harmony with the surrounding buildings, and that it enhances the surrounding neighborhood and community. Criteria 4, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact. The proposed reconstruction will not have any substantial impact on drainage, traffic circulation, dust, noise, odor, or public services, and that it would enhance the immediate surroundings. Criteria 5 is whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, to which the applicant responded that the existing structure is not safe and adequate for the intended use. Here's some more pictures of the phase 1 of the construction, which has already been completed. Another of the proposed front elevation, and then some floor plans that were submitted. So now I will turn it over to the board for questions.
Do you have any questions by board members about the application? I don't know. I'll start. If we go back to the first element, there's essentially 3 areas of the application that we're reviewing, which is the change to materials and the construction of the facade. So I want to concentrate on those elements with my question, if I could. In the first article, whether an undesirable change will be produced to the character of the neighborhood, they did produce other pictures of buildings and structures. Was that their intent to communicate there was a diversity of existing structures and architectural styles within the immediate neighborhood with their with the supplemental materials that they submitted?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So I think they just need to strengthen the application in the respect to the comparisons that they're drawing, as opposed to just a visual review of the properties nearby. I think would help to be able to bolster the argument in that case for the application. The second element, whether benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by other methods. The board is limited to grant the smallest variance necessary. So I think what the application needs to tease out is if there are other construction techniques that would utilize more of the types of materials that were employed on the regular building. Could those in effect be able to provide the same benefit to identifying this as a place of worship or a place that provides the community services that the organization intends to provide? And then is there any effort by the applicant to minimize the deviation from the standards presented in the code? I think is a question that needs to be answered in that method, in the application. And I guess the question to the modification of the front of the structure, does that tie directly into the use of the structure as a religious institution? Are there certain elements of the design of the building that are in concert with religious practices or their freedom to express their religion? That sort of element, identifying this as a site that provides those services would be helpful too. In that it's a community or a religious use that needs to be identified as such, as opposed to a storefront or residential structure. Could be part of the application as well.
Were there any other questions from the board?
Does anyone else have questions about the application?
I might. Is there anything in the application? So I'm looking specifically here at area variance, the criteria number 5 about self-created difficulty. They mentioned a fire. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any additional information about that provided? I'm drawing a blank right now.
We can certainly get that information. Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly want to have that be part of the record, but it needs to be structured in sort of way that the building cannot be reconstructed as it was designed, that the changes to the facade of the building are a result of the inability to reconstruct it, or the desire to essentially design it as they're intending it for.
I could just add, we met with the applicant early in the process and informed them of, the applications they would need to make to pursue this. And we did express some concern just about the transparency that typical storefronts would have on a street such as Central Avenue. And they were able to make some accommodations and incorporating additional windows and reflection in that. So we do appreciate that consideration. And Martin, I think you really hit the nail on the head with respect to the religious aspect of this use, and including those understored in the criteria in this application, because it's not, the traditional application we see to modify the front facade of a property.
Exactly. Just a question on the I'm going to just read the area variance. 375, 407, 4F allow for existing roof form to be changed and replaced. Does that variance relate to the height or the elemental design of the roof, being it a flat roof or a type of pitched roof, or how does that how does that come into play, that necessity for a variance in that circumstance when we're talking about the facade of the building?
I believe it's both. So both the height and the shape of the roof.
So the roof goes, the application contains more than just the facade. There's an actual height increase in the building.
Yes.
The roof rather of the building as well.
Yes.
Okay. A little bit more detail on that would be helpful in the application.
And we'll get that.
Mhm. I don't have any more questions for this. It doesn't seem like any other board members have questions, but we do need to consider consent for lead agency declaration because the planning board has declared themselves lead agency for this. So I think we do need to take action to consent that they are lead agency under seeker. So we do need to take up that action.
Do you want a motion?
I would love a motion.
I move that the City of Albany Planning Board be declared lead agency under seeker.
I second.
Was that Adriana?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Do we have any nays or abstentions? Wonderful. Motion carries and the planning board will be the lead agency. Great for them. Okay. So thanks. If staff could communicate with the applicant, we can supplement the record on this application before we go to a public hearing. Look forward to hearing from the application and they can walk us through the project. And we'll certainly have time to be able to consider any modifications to the application to get to some of those questions. So thank you very much for providing the information for us tonight. So with that, we'll go into the public hearing portion of the meeting. Just to recap, in this portion of the meeting, staff and the board will review the application and then we'll briefly, and then we'll be able to provide the applicant with a period of time to discuss the application, at which time the board may have some questions for the applicant. When the applicant has completed their portion of the presentation, we will open for public comment. We have allowed 3 minutes per public comment per person to be able to respond to the application and provide comments. We love the comments, and if there isn't enough time, I realize sometimes that isn't enough time for folks. We want to make sure we're getting those comments. I highly recommend just sending an email or a letter to the planning department. We will absolutely archive your comment and take it into consideration. At the close of the public comment, the applicant will have a brief period of time to rebut or respond to those comments if they wish. And then the board can take those comments into consideration, either take an action or make a referral following that public comment period. So why don't we begin with our first case? This is 82 Euclid Avenue, and this is this is a review or a request on an interpretation for how the city has applied the term grade and how it applies to retaining walls.
We do have the applicant on the call.
Okay.
So 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Zimmering, you should be able to talk now.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. First of all, I would like to respond to the comments that have been submitted, if I could, because they're relevant to the application.
Mr. Zimmerman, if you could you start by walking us through your application, and then I think we're gonna have some public comment. Then maybe what's best for this application is you lay out your application, allow for the public comments, and then respond to them, so that we're not going through more than one round. I think that might behoove you.
Okay. Basically,
thank you.
We have had a door installed to the side of our basement, and we want a walkway to lead from the sidewalk to that door. Our house sits on a hill. we're not adding to it, or anything, but the house sits on a hill, so it's necessary to put a retaining wall between the front yard and the walkway to the basement door. And basically, the planning department told us that the height of the wall, or excuse me, the very height of the retaining wall with the added railing on top, which is simply a safety railing, so nobody falls off, exceeds the 4-foot limit. However, we don't believe it does, in that the top, no part of the retaining wall or the safety rail on top of that will be more than 4 feet above the yard in the front of our house. The reasoning that we were given was that we measure the height of the fence and the retaining wall from the sidewalk and not from the yard. And so therefore, that's the real purpose of this this request, is to for guidance as to where do we measure the height of the fence, from the ground where it sits or from some other arbitrary point. Also, the retaining wall is not, I don't believe, part of a fence. Retaining wall has a separate and distinct definition under the Albany City Code. And there's no way we could consider that a fence, as you can't see through it at all because it's got dirt on one side of it. So that's the gist of of the interpretation I've asked for from this board.
Thank you. I appreciate you providing some context to this. We do have staff here. I'd like to call upon them to discuss how their interpretation moved forward for this particular project.
Sure. So this was an application that was referred to us by Department of Buildings and Regulatory Compliance. There was initial application that was submitted at some point along the project was changed, and when it was referred to us the second time, the height of the wall from the base at the bottom to the top of the wall, I believe, is approximately 5 feet 7 inches. And then there's a safety railing on top. It's an additional 36 inches. The concern here is our code requires, has a maximum allowable height for fences or walls of 4 feet within front yard areas. I understand that the traditional application here is a little bit odd, being that this is a retaining wall, but the way the applicant has proposed it is, in reference to building height, that, it should be measured from the grade along the front of the building. If you were to do that, you essentially have to project 4 feet up on the front of the building and project that out to the property lines. You could potentially, through that interpretation, wind up at a particularly tall fence along the front property boundary that would sort of in our position undermine the principle of a 4 to 6 foot boundary fence. The applicant did reference a definition of retaining wall in the city code. I don't think that is in the Chapter 375, the Unified Sustainable Development Ordinance. Had that been in there, and in some cases, I wish that had been in there, because in the case of a retaining wall, to the extent that it is retaining ground behind it, I think there is a little bit of reconsideration that we need to make when we update our code. But as it currently stands, our interpretation is, measuring from the grade of the ground to the top of the fence, or excuse me, to the top of the wall, exceeds that 4 foot limitation. And that is to some degree what the neighbor will see on the abutting property. So our referral was that they should apply for an area variance. We didn't take a position on whether that area variance, we were favorable or unfavorable to that. But we do felt in the interest of this interpretation in the city code generally, that would be the appropriate approach in the case of this application.
Thanks, Brad. Do we have any questions from the board before we go to public comment? Well, my board members consider a question. I guess I'll ask one. Is there, there seems to be a little uncertainty of the way the code is written as to whether this treatment on top of the retaining wall is a fence or a railing. Do we define railing in city code? Or can the applicant talk to this being interpreted, or his interpretation of this as a railing as opposed to a fence?
That I can't answer that question. I think it's significant that without the railing, the top of the retaining wall will be no higher than the ground was that existed before we installed the retaining wall. The only purpose of that railing is just safety, and I was advised by the building inspector that we needed to do that. Frankly, I don't really care either way whether or not we have the wall. I'm including it because the building inspector told me to. But like I said, the retaining wall itself will not significantly be higher than the existing ground. And then the railing on top of that will be less than 4 feet above the existing ground.
Okay. Thanks. Why don't we open up to public comment? And Sam, do you want to kind of walk us through who's signed up for public comment on this particular case?
Yeah, let me see. If anyone in attendance would like to speak on this, just raise your hand. I don't have an actual list in front of me right now.
Okay.
I have read the comments that have been submitted to, in writing. And while we're doing that, may I respond to the two most significant comments?
Unless anybody has an objection, I don't have that.
I don't have anybody raising their hand right now.
Okay.
In the written comments that have been submitted, there are two main themes. One is the height of the existing wall that's there right now. And I would like to state that we agreed with the building inspector, and we have already committed to reducing the height of the existing wall by 2 courses of cinder block. So that, you know, what's there now is not what the final product is going to be. We do agree with the building inspector and apparently everybody else that our contractor put too many courses of cinder block when creating the wall. The other main comment has been the length of time that this has taken, and we agree that this is taking too long. Our first contractor started and then kind of disappeared on us. We finally removed him from the project. We knew when we removed him from the project, and I believe I spoke with the building inspector about this, that our new contractor was in the middle of a job and would start our job as soon as he was done with that, which he did. And he was working diligently and making progress and getting this thing done until August, when we received the stop work order, and we've been under a stop work order since August. But we're prepared to move forward and get this thing done within a month or a month and a half of getting the approval of resale. Thank you.
So a question I have, if we could go back to the slide where we have the elevations. So the elevations concerning this slide, are those still correct?
Yes, actually looking at the ground, the top of the ground will be a little bit closer to the top of the retaining wall. especially on the first two courses than indicated. And then as it gets close, at its closest point to the sidewalk, the top of the wall will be only 18.5 inches above the level of the sidewalk. But there'll be ground going up to on the top two tiers of this retaining of the retaining wall. The ground will go up to essentially the top of the wall.
Brett, if I could indulge you, can you walk me through on this visual your department's interpretation of how you apply the height of a fence in relation to the geography again, please?
Yeah, well, we're sort of looking at the wrong side of the wall projection here. It would be from the ground plane, so wherever the lowest point of the wall to the top of the wall. There is a definition in the code of height that clearly references a building height because it speaks to roof structures as the top point of the measurement. Quite admittedly, that could be more diligently defined to speak to fences and signs and other things that we traditionally measure height for. But in speaking with our engineering department, that would be typically the way they would measure a retaining wall as well, would be from the ground level to the top of the wall. Now the applicant here has indicated that they're removing 2 levels of cinder blocks. So, whether that changes the ultimate height, I assume that it would. That's an amendment that we weren't aware of that we could take a closer look at. Some of the concerns that we heard in the comments were related to the height of the wall going beyond what it was retaining. And I think there is somewhat of a differential there. So, we would be willing to take a harder look at this provided those amendments were made. But as it currently stands, that would be the way that we would measure from the driveway side at the bottom to the top. And I think that there's I think you'd have to measure all the way to the top of the railing in terms of a cumulative measurement rather than measuring them separately. It'd be the same if someone installed a wall on their property line and decided they wanted a 4-foot fence on top of that. I mean, cumulatively, you'd have an 8-foot application.
Okay.
And I would say if, the criteria here, if we were looking at a variance, if it's providing a function of retaining and security, I think there is a relatively decent case for a variance in that case, but that isn't the application the board has in front of it.
Yeah, I don't want to get above my skis, but I'm looking at this as a railing as opposed to a fence. And I'd like to know how the change to the application impacts the height of the structure, because that's certainly information we need to be able to look at. So, all right, I don't think we're going to take any action on this tonight. We're going to consider the public comments and the applicant's provision of testimony for this project. I do appreciate the opportunity to review this, and I want to thank the applicant for taking the time this evening to walk us through it and shed some light on this particular project. And I thank staff for providing us with some more information on this. So,
thank you.
Okay. With that, let's move to our next case, which is 185 Henry Johnson Boulevard, requesting area variance 96, which is variance for required off-street parking.
So we do have the applicant on the call. Mr. Hirschberg, you should be able to talk now.
Thank you. Daniel Hirschberg, representing the applicant. Give me 1 minute, maybe I can get my view up too. Well, you don't have to really see me. Okay. Here we go. maybe I can make it now. Oh, well, I'll make the presentation incommunicado. The project has been before you before. We talked about the need for parking. This site, Roy's Caribbean Restaurant, has operated traditionally without any off-street parking. The reduction of required parking due to transit and for shared use reduces the 26 total parking spaces, which would be required based upon the square footage of the restaurant, to 19 spaces. Can you go to the next slide, Sam? This shows you the area, the stars on the restaurant there. 200 Henry Johnson Boulevard, the office where the Planning and Economic Development office is right across the street. One issue here you might take a look at, there's a parking lot behind 200 Henry Johnson Boulevard, which is made available off hours for residents of the area to use with permits. The applicant would like his residential units to take advantage of that, whether or not they're granted and be at the behest of the department. Next. This is the site. I limited the parking tables. The other plans I'd submitted referred to stormwater management, a whole other issues, but I limited to the parking question since that's the reason we're in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. And what that lays out is the computation I explained before, the parking based upon residential units and the parking required for restaurant use. That totals 26 parking spots, taking a credit for shared parking and for proximity to transit service. It drops it down to 19 parking spots required. Next. So we took a look at the standards and we request a variance of the parking of a total of 7 parking spots because we have 3 on-site and 4 on-street parking spots. So if we claim those, that knocks it down to the 19. That's an explanation of why we got it down from 26 to 19. Next is this is a repetition of the same thing, but it makes the point that if in fact there was additional parking behind 200 Henry Johnson was available per unit, the total shortfall will be 14 parking spaces, which we believe will not impact the quality of the neighborhood or the character of the neighborhood. Next. There were no alternatives to the amount. A portion of this site was acquired from the city of Albany, which has a parking lot that adjoins it, and the applicant was limited to the amount of property he could acquire from him, so that he did not have the capability of having more on-site parking. Next. We don't think it's substantial. We have a plan which shows that there's 62 on-street parking spaces, which show parking in the immediate vicinity of the restaurant. If you go to the next slide, you can see where we picked. It shows those spaces there, and there are plenty of restaurants in the city which don't have on-street that rely on on-street parking. A lot of people are familiar with the cluster up on Madison Avenue, the Point, Junior's, Kismet, Cafe Madison, and Madison Poorhouse all rely primarily on on-street parking. There's a small parking lot to the rear of one of those, but most of the parking is on street, on Madison Avenue, or on other side streets in the area. And there are plenty of other places in the city, downtown restaurants, which do not have off-street parking. They take advantage of on-street parking, or if necessary, people park in commercial parking lots. We think that this is no different than those sort of operations. Next, I think that's one more. There were the question: do we impact any other factors? The water use was one issue. The sewage was another issue. We make the statement here that it's an insignificant portion of water of the city of Albany, so that we will have no negative environmental impacts due to the use of water. Next, and impact on the combined sewer. We're actually reducing it by amount that well exceeds the amount that we'd have to reduce it by. You normally have to reduce it by 4 times the average sanitary flow. We're reducing it by 8.75 times the average sanitary flow, so that we are retaining more water than is required. We're doing that with a combination of blue roof and storage facility underneath the patio area in front of the building. And we're also treating the stormwater with a hydrodynamic separator. Next, traffic circulation. In 2019, the AADT for Henry Johnson Boulevard was 22,733 vehicles. The impact of additional vehicles on traffic circulation on Henry Johnson Boulevard would be negligible. A one-way circulation on 3rd Street limits any impact on traffic circulation. Next, dust, noise, and odor. Contractors will be required to maintain the area as free as dust as possible, and noise during operations will be limited to absence of outside events. And cooking odors will be controlled by vents and filters. And public service, the applicant believes that during operation of the facility, no unusual demand will be made on public services. And I think there's one more. The applicant stated the need for the variance is self-created. It's something created by Roy's Caribbean need to increase their building to improve their economic viability of their restaurant. But in fact, the request for this variance is self-created. I think that completes my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any questions by board members?
I was wondering, can you talk a little bit more about the use of the on-street parking in the neighborhood?
Yeah, in order to show that there are places available, these have to be shared with the residents of the area. But traditionally, a portion of those are vacant. The hours of the restaurant are unfortunately coincidentally with the same time people are coming home, so that there might be more of the parking spots used. But we think that it's not unusual. We limited it to areas that were very close to the site, within 1 block in each direction. As a matter of fact, we didn't go back towards Livingston Avenue at all, since we didn't want people to walk over to Livingston Avenue and park there, although there would be parking places available on Livingston Avenue also. So I think that the demonstration of that is that for the 19 additional spots, there are 62 available. How many of those will be available at any one time can't be exactly determined. And if in fact people didn't find spots within that block, they could go out another block and walk 2 blocks to the restaurant, or 3 blocks to the restaurant, if they had to get that far. But there is plenty of on-street parking in the area. As a matter of fact, the entire area takes advantage of on-street parking, with the exception of the public buildings and the one strip center next door on Livingston Avenue, which are relatively modern additions to the streetscape. The old streetscape had virtually no off-street parking lots on it at all.
Because so the idea rate is to have like with this extension to use it as a banquet hall. So like, right, like the idea is that there would be a mass of people, or like a large group of people, all gathering at the same time for X amount of hours at this location that probably doesn't usually see this amount. Or maybe I'm making a erroneous assumption here, but I guess, can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how does that work within the flow of like the use of parking in the neighborhood already? Because like, it's not just people coming and going for like pickup and delivery. It's a group of people coming at a certain time, staying for a certain period of time, if I understand correctly.
Yeah. Under its current operation, people come for dinner and they stay a while. With an event, they might stay longer. But meanwhile, the same element that applies to their existing operation, where they have no on-street parking at all, would be similar to what they need now. There would be an increase because the increased size of the area designated for restaurant use, which is what the banquet hall and restaurant both have. The demands are stuff that, and again, it's periodic. There won't be an event there every night, or I'm pretty sure Roy's would like that, but the events would probably more than likely be created on weekends or Friday nights or weekends, but there are plenty of midweek events that could take place there too. So in any event, if more people arrive than can conveniently find parking within the 62 parking spot area that were identified, they will have to arrive further and park and walk back further, because the only, there is no commercial parking lot available with a convenient distance to the site where people can come in, pay and park. So that will be the result of increased demands during events. And I don't think there's any way to avoid that.
So if I understand, the main point you're making is that, there is a lot more on-street parking available or options than what is required, than the parking required for the project. And so with this like 62 and potentially more if you go further away, you're saying that like that, provides sufficient coverage that at all times there'd be at least those, at least the 19 spots required by for the project. They're not provided by the project and as part of the project, but they're available on street.
Yeah, like many projects, like many areas in the city, primarily the downtown area, which quite honestly, you have a very large facility that have zero parking requirement due to the zone that they're in. Unfortunately, in this zone, you do have off-street parking requirements. That having been said, the applicant believes that it works because otherwise he wouldn't be making the investment in the increased size of his restaurant and the increase for the banquet hall space, which he also would hopefully be economically creative and have additional income to support his business. But I think essentially it's not much different than all of downtown. If you go to downtown, the only difference down there are commercial parking lots. So that, if you go to a restaurant on State Street that has zero parking, you would go to a commercial parking lot. Here, the commercial parking lots aren't available, but there is plenty of on-street parking available with a little less convenient for the people that have to walk the furthest. But again, it is available.
Thank you.
Dan, if I could, there are two parking lots located immediately adjacent or just right across the street from this parking lot. There's the police lot the Albany Police Department uses, and then there's a lot that is used by the city of Albany, and then I believe there is a lease relationship with residents around that lot. Has the applicant looked into utilizing any spaces in those lots to secure off-street parking so that it would minimize the variance or the 19 additional off-street spaces would be reduced.
Yeah, the one thing that we think the residents in the applicant's buildings would be qualified for is applying for a permit to park behind 200 Henry Johnson Boulevard during nighttime. And if that was granted, that for all 5 units, that would drop it down to our demand for 14 rather than 19. The applicant is not aware of the city's desire to make any portion of the police lot, department lot available to the applicant.
Is that they haven't reached out or they haven't received a response?
I don't, the creation of the property line between Roy's and the balance of the parking lot was negotiated with the city, the Department of Police and the Department of Traffic Engineering. And that's as far as they were willing to go with regard to that alignment of the parking lot. There is a lot of parking there, but again, the police department did not choose to make more available. I don't know whether or not we could approach them again, but our goal here was to find out how much they were willing to give us, and the area they were willing to give us just accommodated the addition and a very small parking lot to the rear that it would allow for access to a dumpster and for 3 parking spaces.
No, I certainly understand the need to acquire land for the construction of the particular project, but as you're aware, the board is required to minimize a variance. There presents a couple of opportunities to see about minimizing that variance by utilization in spaces in lots that don't seem to be, at least from don't seem to be fully utilized in any capacity. So it seems to me there's an opportunity there to minimize the variance by inquiring about whether there is the opportunity to get off-street parking in any of those other lots.
Well, I wasn't directly involved in the negotiation, and it took place primarily between members of the Corporation Counsel's office, people from the police department, traffic engineering, and the applicant. And I got involved after that discussion, and that's when the property line arrangement was determined. And I was not aware of any offer or capability of gaining any property of usage of parking spaces in the police lot. I don't know that. I can't categorically say that they were denied because I wasn't involved in those discussions.
Yeah, I think at the workshop, we had inquired as to whether those conversations were had. So that's still something that needs to be answered.
Well, there's other people from the applicant who may choose to speak during the public comment period that they may have more of an answer.
Thanks. Do we have any other questions from board members?
I would also be curious as to when those previous conversations were had, if they were had, because circumstances may have changed with the advent of the pandemic in terms of more spots possibly being available, and any prior decisions may change. So I would be curious as to when those discussions took place and if there's any appetite to have another discussion to see if anything has changed.
Well, the original discussion dates back at least a year, and maybe even 15 months. And we did not get a final answer from the city through Corporation Counsel and the Chief Superintendent of Parking, Traffic Engineering. We didn't get that response until about 5 months ago, that's when we were able to finalize our application to the planning board. So you know, they weren't taking place recently, but they, you know, discussions had taken place over a protracted period of time to try to find out what the city's stance was with regard to providing land for this parcel.
Yeah, definitely understand that aspect. It's the minimization of the variance or alternatives considered that that I think needs strengthening. So, do we have any other questions from board members? Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak for or against the project?
Anyone who would like to speak, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you. It doesn't look like we have anybody.
Great. So with that, I think we'll hold this application to the next meeting to be able to answer some of those questions about the opportunities for off-street parking and minimizing that variance. So I want to thank Dan for his time this evening and the opportunity to allow this to be part of the public hearing. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move to the next case, which is project 00424. This is for property address 1053 Broadway, requesting 3 variances, area variance 79, 92, and 93. One is a rehearing of a variance that would allow a front deck to extend into the right of way or any easement in a mixed use form based zoning district where that is not permitted. But there are 2 additional variances which the board has not had the opportunity to hear from the applicant yet. And that is variance 375-402-2C, and that is to allow the construction of a front porch, which is not permitted in the mixed use core frontage standards. And a separate variance to allow for the porch to extend past the front build out zone under the mixed use core frontage standards. I believe we have the applicant here with us this evening to present on those other 2 elements of the application. And we have 2 considerations, regulatory considerations for the board as well. So with that, we'll hand it over to the applicant to discuss these 2 other elements of their case, and then we can be able to move into public comment and rebuttal.
Excellent, thank you. My name is Chris Martell. I'm appearing on behalf of the applicant. Samuel, I'm noticing the PowerPoint presentation that is up on the screen right now is the PowerPoint that I used on the first meeting. Do you have the one that I sent late afternoon yesterday?
Yeah, I do. We just wanted to include the
Okay.
first variance that was being reheard. But I can go to the.
It's very similar. What I was just doing is I included some more slides and tried to make this a bit concise because I know that the board has heard this presentation a couple times.
Yeah, structurally, I think if there's any changes to the initial area variance, certainly include them. If not, we have that as part of the public record. We've had that as part of the hearing. So
okay. Let me just, if I could, because I was a little bit unclear. So just so I understand your last point, nothing has changed from a factual standpoint. So is the board comfortable with the record that has already been put in front of it over the course of the last 2 hearings?
If you're comfortable with what you've submitted to the record and that there's no other elements you would like to add to it, you can certainly move to the other 2 elements since we've already discussed that one at prior hearings. Thank you.
Okay. So what we're going into now, so this is at 1053 Broadway in Albany, Brothers Brewing Company. We're looking for a variance from 37402C table 375-4021 because it does not expressly permit a front porch. That is our proposed deck. And we're also looking, just out of an abundance of caution, to get an area variance from the build to zone. We are proposing to construct a 13-foot wide, 110-foot long deck in the public right of way. Next slide, please. And next after that as well. Okay. So in doing this, I will get into our financial condition and the reason for these variances down the road, but I think this is an important point in the context of what we're trying to do. What I've given you is an overhead shot of Bridge Street. You know, whenever Google Maps took this photo, I think it was probably before we were open, but you can see that I've marked at the top of the top right hand of your screen, you've got Surpass Chemical. Druthers Brewing Company is labeled in this picture, and it's the bottom right hand side. All the left on the other side of Bridge Street is National Grid. When Druthers is operating, the situation that you currently end up with is, you can see there's the red box that runs along Bridge Street on the side of National Grid. Cars park vertically along this area. So they pull in, that's about the width of where a car would be on Bridge Street. You can see the cars that are parked up against Druthers Brewing Company, parked in vertically, you know, head in. So what happens here is you've got a narrowing of Bridge Street, which makes it very difficult for folks for vehicles to pass through this area. Another issue with this setup is that when folks are coming, the majority of everyone who comes to Druthers is parking along Broadway. It's actually unmetered space. And then we've also rented another parking lot about a quarter of a block down on the left-hand side of Broadway, so right across the street. As they're walking to Broadway or to Druthers, there isn't a sidewalk on this. So the folks, and they're not going to go in between cars. So they're walking in that narrowed Bridge Street. They're walking from the Broadway area to Druthers, essentially down the middle of the street, and then they're catching up with our set of stairs and entering Druthers. They're leaving the same exact way. What we're trying to do essentially is build a 110-foot deck here, 13 feet wide, 110, in an attempt to try to replace revenue. We are considerably down. 2019 was our last normal year of restaurant operations in Albany. In 2020, due to complications from COVID, sales in our Albany location came in right around 49% down from 2019 levels. We saw a loss in revenue of over $2 million. In 2021, as local COVID rates reduced and stabilized, our Albany location sales came back up. They still fell 29% short of 2019 sales level, a loss of a little bit over $1 million in revenue. Now, while at the same time, it's worth pointing out that our Saratoga Springs location and our Schenectady locations both experienced similar declines in revenue in 2020, but each place saw a rebound in 2021, to the 2019 levels. In fact, one location actually did better than 2019. And it's not really, from my perspective, a secret as to why this bounce back was possible. In each of these locations, Saratoga and Schenectady, we have pretty significant outdoor dining options. We also have overhead door options that allow us to open the doors and create maximum ventilation and kind of an indoor-outdoor feel in those areas. We don't have any of this in Albany, and until we get it, I think we're going to continue to suffer. I don't see how we could bring back revenue if I didn't have other, sample properties to pull from in the somewhat immediate area. Maybe I wouldn't reach that conclusion, but that's where we are now. But I just thought that this overhead would be, so what we're trying to do with this entire project is not only replace the lost revenue, but make this situation on Bridge Street and Broadway safer for everyone. We have Surpass that's right down the street from us. They've got trucks that utilize the street. I think it's much safer to have pedestrians walking on a sidewalk, a raised curb sidewalk, rather than walking down the middle of an already narrow street. So our proposal, in addition to building the deck that I mentioned, we're also adding over 150 feet of sidewalk that will essentially take the existing sidewalk on Broadway and run it all the way to the edge of our property. And we are also we're replacing several of the windows on our building with either a nanowall system or an overhead door system to create maximum ventilation in our space. So that's kind of an overview of the project. Next slide, please. And these are just the standards that I pointed out before, which I'm sure the board is aware of. Next slide, please. And these are obviously the elements of an area variance. And what I'll do is just walk you through my take on each of these elements. Perfect. First one looks at the character of the neighborhood. How is our requested variance consistent with the character of surrounding properties, and how would it change the character of the neighborhood? Druthers is located in the MUFW, and per the USDO, the purpose of the MUFW is to allow for a greater variety of building reuse and encourage the redevelopment of the warehouse district into a walkable urban mixed-use center containing residential, retail, commercial, and entertainment uses, while protecting the continued viability of the existing industrial uses that are included in and surround the area. So I just threw a few bullets into here. The construction of the proposed deck and the addition of the sidewalks and the ventilation of our space, it's my take that this builds upon the commercial redevelopment that Druthers began in 2015. We're adding sidewalks, which is going to increase walkability, a marked, expressed intent of the district that we're located in. And as I'll get into a little bit deeper in this presentation, I don't see how it threatens the viability of any existing industrial uses in the area. Next slide, please. We've been looking for alternatives to what we're proposing for the last several years. The first is the purchase of 1043 Broadway. 1043 Broadway is located right next to Druthers Brewing Company. We entered into a purchase agreement. We started our due diligence. We determined that we did a phase 1 environmental, a phase 2 environmental, and it determined that there was a lot of environmental work to be done on the property. We actually were looking to move forward with the purchase of the property. The property went into litigation. It stayed in litigation for the better part of 3.5 years. And when the dust settled, the partner that didn't wish to sell to us ended up with the property, and it's no longer an option for us. We looked at constructing a rooftop deck on the top of Druthers Brewing Company. This would have required us to add elevators, 2 sets of staircases, and steel reinforcement to the entire building. It wasn't something that was financially viable for us. We worked with folks from NYS EDC and had discussions with the folks at Surpass about the possibility of moving Surpass to the Port of Albany. Nothing ever came of the conversations. It was deemed too expensive to do. We had a summer of picnic tables in the street, but again, when people go to restaurants, they're not. We found that they're not necessarily looking to eat in the middle of the street. It was very difficult for us to go up and down the stairs out into the street. And because the street is used quite a bit during business hours, every day we had to drag picnic tables into the street, water pitchers, everything had to be set up. And it just didn't work I don't think our customers bought in, our staff had difficulty with it, and it was just not deemed a success by us. Next slide, please. So what you have in front of you here is, I just kind of went in why, what we're looking to do is, we looked at what we're doing in Saratoga and what we're doing in Schenectady from an outdoor seating perspective and tried to apply that to Albany. So what we did is we took the estimated number of people that we'd get to eat in Albany outside, in addition to the folks who are already coming to Albany. So who would we get? How many people would be served? What's our average check? And we came up with essentially what you have, the table right in front of you here. And what we're trying to do is essentially replace about, right around $1.1 million in revenue. If you take a look at what we've got here, this is going to bring in, and this is conservative, but we're looking at about $65,000 per month in additional revenue. If we get 7 months of use out of the deck, which may be optimistic, we're looking at a total of $455,000 in additional revenue. After taking out annual debt service on the deck, which we're calculating at $79,740 annually, we would reduce our sales deficit by around $375,260. We're taking steps in other phases of our business, mostly distribution of our beer off premises, to try to close the remaining revenue gap. The last time I spoke, we were going through and I kind of just touched, I didn't have the specific loss numbers yet for 2021, but the point was made, can we build, does the deck bear a relationship to, does the return on investment bear a relationship to the money we lost and so on and so forth? And it does. I mean, we couldn't build a deck big enough to close the revenue gap that we're currently experiencing. I think we need not only outdoor seating, I think we need a change in consumer attitude. And we also need to improve other areas of our business. But adding $375,260 at least gets us a little bit closer to, the $1.1 million and change loss that we're currently working off of. Next slide, please. How substantial is the deviation? And I mentioned this last time. From a numerical perspective, you could argue, I mean, given the size of the easement, what I'm looking for versus the total square foot of the public right away, the percentage is pretty high, and you could make the argument that it's substantial. But using an impact on the community standard, again, I don't think we're disrupting much by adding outdoor seating to, property that's, I know it's public right away, but we're talking about, 115, 20 feet long and 15 feet wide, that really has no other use that I can imagine. So from that perspective, I think what we're asking for is quite insignificant. Next slide, please. Impact on the surrounding neighborhood through potential impacts, drainage, traffic circulation, dust, noise, odor, public services, etc. We don't see there being any impact. I think we're going to improve traffic circulation by asking for no parking on Bridge Street. I don't think, with respect to noise, we are a pretty quiet venue to begin with. I mean, we don't do a lot of, we're closed by 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock on most nights. That we're not in a residential neighborhood, so it's not like we'd be disturbing neighbors with the outdoor use that we're requesting. So all in all, I think this is a net benefit, and I don't think there'd be any detriment to the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Self-created difficulty. Admittedly, we purchased the property with the existing lot lines and zoning ordinances. That's why we looked at several other options when COVID wasn't on our radar yet. Several other options for outdoor dining, the rooftop next door, Surpass Chemical. But everything was kind of flipped on its head with COVID. And what went from, outdoor dining was a like to have for us. And now I'm a firm believer that is a must-have. It's existential for us at this point. So we didn't create the conditions that face the restaurant industry. We're just subject to them. So I wouldn't say that this is a self-created difficulty for purposes of this hearing. Excuse me. Next slide, please. I received a copy of a notice from the Albany County Planning Board 2 days ago, and it caught me a little off guard. I had seen their initial notification where they recommended that this be decided locally by this board, but they did weigh in and they disapproved of the project. And in their disapproval, they essentially cited 3 things. A tractor trailer route that is dangerously close to the proposed deck, the location of an ADA compliant sidewalk, and industrial use in close proximity to retail use. So if I could, with respect to this tractor trailer route that is dangerously close to the proposed deck, I just want to start by pointing out that the tractor trailers operate right now, and they're very close to pedestrian foot traffic. They're very close to our staircase. And And what we are proposing to do, I think addresses, adding a sidewalk with a 5-foot curb buffer and a steel brace deck with concrete bollards in front of it, I think adds quite a bit of protection. But we got into, during the last presentation, what the possibilities are. I'm trying to take, what people are forgetting, I think, is when I read stuff like this, is that we're already there. I mean, this notice or decision reads to me as if we're not already located at 1053 Broadway, not already located next to Surpass Chemical, and not doing business next to them. What I think we've got is a dangerous situation. What we're trying to do is improve our business and also improve the situation for everyone. That was our intent in doing this. So I just want to point out, if you could go to the next slide, please. What I've done here is I'm giving you the route that Surpass Chemical currently uses to access its yard and its scale. Okay, the red line that I've drawn is a Surpass Chemical truck driving down Broadway. They're making a left onto Bridge Street. They're making a right onto Mill Street, and they're turning right into their yard. From there, they can go through the yard, and they can either turn left on Bridge Street or right back onto Bridge Street and go down Mill Street and go out a different direction. Now, if at any point Surpass thinks that this route is too dangerous, or that they don't want to drive by a deck full of people, they have another option available to them. It doesn't require any investment. They don't have to rejigger anything. They have to buy new equipment. It's laid out in this next slide. Next slide, please. In lieu of turning down Bridge Street, Surpass now goes to the street on the next block. That's Tivoli. So they drive down Broadway. They make a left on Tivoli, a left onto Mill Street, and a left into their yard. When they're leaving the yard, they only need to make a right onto Bridge Street and a right back onto Mill Street and back out onto Broadway via Tivoli. So what I think that Druthers is proposing here is good for the Druthers business. I think it creates a safer Bridge Street for Surpass. And if at any point Surpass is unhappy with how things are right now, or how things may be under a new paradigm where we bring in this deck and the sidewalk, they've got this option readily available to them. There's no retail use down here that they would run by. You've got a moving company, and it's my understanding, I think it's industrial uses, primarily industrial uses here. It's just an alternative if they deem, I'm not saying they need to do that, just it's an alternative that already exists. Okay, next slide, please. With respect to the ADA compliant sidewalk ending near the Druthers, or excuse me, near the Surpass property, I'm not sure, like this is the existing condition that you're looking at right now. It's where the sidewalk ends, but as you can see, the area around it has been built up over the years, and it's not a raised sidewalk. Perhaps at one time it was raised, but it's a flat sidewalk. But I don't know how you would end a sidewalk any other way than, I've just never seen a raised curb ending a sidewalk. I mean, usually there's a ramp so that you can, it's accessible, yeah, but I've just never seen the alternative. So I don't know how we would fix that. I mean, I don't own Surpass's property. That, for all I know, that's a right of way right in front. I mean, if it follows the public right of way that we're dealing with, but I guess what I'm not understanding is if we go to no parking on Bridge Street, just about, I would say 99.9% of all people who go to Druthers Brewing Company are going to be coming from Broadway. The lot we rent or one of the open spaces out there. And if you go to the next slide, please. This is what Bridge Street looks like right now at the very top. So as I mentioned before, all of Broadway is unmetered parking, and there are a couple hundred spots. Add that to the 65 spots that we have rented right across the street. I've got a crosswalk for people to cross the street, cross Broadway, cross Bridge Street. Then I've got an accessible ramp right there. So I'm not sure who would actually be using the ramp sidewalk that borders Surpass Chemical property, but I also don't really understand how we would ever end a sidewalk without an accessible ramp. It just, I've never seen that done before. So I'm not expecting people would use that ramp very often. So I don't, it's hard for me to answer. I wish I would have had an opportunity to present at the Albany County Planning Board, because it just seemed like in a sense, they parroted some of the concerns discussed by Surpass without taking into consideration that we already have a dangerous situation, and some of the steps that Druthers is taking or proposing to take should really improve things. And I think that's my last slide right there. And with that, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you for the opportunity.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
So you keep talking about no park, in your proposed plan, no parking on Bridge Street.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, like, so is that just something you're proposing? I know you've had discussions with the City of Albany, traffic and engineering and stuff like that. Like, how would that, is there anything concrete as to this no parking on Bridge Street that, or is it just kind of currently a proposal and something that, Druthers would try and implement on its own, or is there, weigh in from the City of Albany that this is actually something that would happen with, like, no parking being allowed? Thank you.
Yep. So we submitted when we submitted the variance request and had discussions with the various Albany departments, we spoke with the Department of Traffic and Engineering, and also representatives from the fire department or public safety, if you will. It is the recommendation of both that I don't want to misspeak. I guess at the meetings, it's my understanding that we would be working with the Department of Traffic and Engineering and the fire department to ensure that there was no parking on Bridge Street. So if the easiest way, I don't think this works as well if you continue to allow parking on Bridge Street. And I'm talking about in front of Druthers Brewing. If the Surpass folks want to park across the sidewalk at the bottom of Bridge Street, that's up to them completely, and they can work it out with the Department of Traffic and Engineering. But what they do doesn't necessarily narrow the street. So, but what customers of Druthers, when they park on Bridge Street, it narrows the street. I can say 100%, the only thing I really control here is what happens up against the Druthers property. If we were to move forward, we're going to have a deck there without curb cuts. For the majority of the thing, we'll have a deck taking up our parking spaces. So there won't be any parking up against the Druthers building. But it's my understanding that the City of Albany is on board with at least as it pertains to the space in front of Druthers, with the idea of outlawing all parking there and putting up, tow away signs and enforcing tickets and so on and so forth. So that's kind of my understanding of where we are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And can you say which of the locations actually experienced an increase in profit in 2021 versus 2019?
Saratoga Springs.
Thank you.
If I go back to the parking, the proposal that you're putting forward is really an effort to make sure that street is accessible for tractor trailers, making turn movements and proceeding down the street with good sight lines and ability to navigate that street. If I'm reading that wrong, just let me know.
Oh, that's correct.
The question I have is, I think, and I'm not going to try to make any arguments for or against but is there consideration to parking management that would allow for those vehicles to still make those turn movements, but not completely eliminate the parking on the street as it relates to other institutions parking in that area during the daytime, or is parking absolutely necessary 24/7 on that street?
Yeah, I would say that I'm completely open. I know that getting rid of the parking up against Druthers is going to do a lot to help, because as I showed in that picture, you could see how the rear end of vehicles stick out into the street, causing the street to be narrow. So if we were to just enforce the parking zones that were there right now, and depending on what the city will let me do, I mean, if we can put up permanent chains, showing like fire zone, you will be towed, things of that nature, perhaps that's a solid enough deterrent to people to not park along the entire street. So I'd kind of be open to whatever the city. I was just trying to create. I looked at what Surpass submitted when they first objected to our plan, and there was very little mention of fumes and things of that nature. It was pictures of people parking poorly. It was people parking on train tracks. It was people parking on sidewalks. It was, and I thought, man, if I can clean that up once and for all, and I thought the easiest way is, if you don't see anyone parking, you're not going to park. I mean, it's just, that was my thought. So I don't want, I'm not trying to inconvenience Surpass and I know that they've been operating that business for many, many years, and they've parked at the bottom of Bridge Street for many, many years. And it bothers, to a large extent, maybe 100%, it bothers no one. And it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. I'm not trying to outlaw that, but I want to make it safe. And if they think it's safer, to allow some parking and keep their guys from not walking on icy sidewalks, then I'm okay with that. It's really just, I don't want to hear about parking issues. I mean, I think we're probably one of the only restaurants that are like saying, please give us less parking. We'll work with our neighbors on the other side. We'll pay for parking spaces. I just want it to be safer for everyone and work somewhat harmoniously. I know that we disagree on this deck. I don't know the reasons why, but again, I'm okay with allowing some parking. I just want it to be clearly enforced, and we've had some difficulty doing that.
And I mean, with all due respect, we don't have the ability to condition and any sort of parking requirements that the city may impose. So I want to get away from that.
Yeah.
If we could, and talk specifically about the deck. In the size and scope of the deck and what was being reviewed by the county planning board, are there any considerations that the applicant could be making to limit the size or the scope of the deck, or are there factors that have influenced the size, shape, and location of the deck that are driving the need for the variances?
Yes, well, certainly there is. As I mentioned earlier, this deck will go quite a ways towards replacing some of the revenue we've lost, but not anywhere near the entire, the entire pull that we need. The deck is sized as currently so that we get a reasonable return on revenue and start chipping away at that that revenue loss that we've experienced over the last 2 years, and we'll continue to do so this year. Also, we cut the deck off so that we can allow for delivery trucks to pull in. Our biggest truck is is delivering to us is a little under 30 feet right now. We've got about 48, I believe, like in between the stairs for the deck and our kind of what we refer to as our like loading dock ramp. So we shortened the deck because of that, and we're going to have to further shorten the deck to comply with sightline rules set by traffic and engineering, and we're working on that now. So really, if you look at why the deck is a certain shape, it's as wide as it is just so we could do a certain amount of distancing, because candidly, I don't know where the restaurant industry is heading with spacing and so on and so forth. But This is so that we can get the number of tables represented in that chart that was part of this presentation. And the length, go ahead. Yeah.
If you could go back to that slide, maybe that would help
Yeah.
us understand the dimensions of which. So my question on this circumstance is that the deck is located a certain distance out from the front of the building.
Yep.
Does it need to be that distance because of any factors of service or any sort of regulatory requirements because of codes?
No. No. This is a function of getting as many people as we can out on the deck safely. And we kind of took our existing staircase as a measurement. Like our existing staircase goes out around just a touch under 11 feet. So we're talking about going out an additional 2 feet and then putting the raised curb sidewalk on the other side of it. So our deck was a little bit wider. I didn't think a deck had to be, a sidewalk had to be 5 feet wide, but I thought it was 4. And so we used to have a 14-foot deck. So we lost some tables, in that, but we kind of designed this. We're going to lose a little bit on the end there because of the sight line, on the surpass line. So this is just what we put together to figure out, hey, once you start spending on this deck, this is for us, right around $375,000 proposal. And we haven't been making money. For the last couple of years, it's just something that I think we need to do to start showing some signs of positivity. And, this is what we came up with. And that chart that I've got showing the number of visits and so on and so forth, really is just how we backed into it. This is the number of seats that we needed, and this was the size deck that we needed to get that number of seats.
Is there a need to have the deck go all the way to the sidewalk limit, or can you accomplish the same number of seats without pushing the deck to the limit of the sidewalk?
No, I can't get the same number of seats. No, I've tried doing that. We used to have another, what was this? This is 80. Let me just, if I can pull up, I'm at my computer. I just wanted to see if I have another drawing. I don't know if I have another drawing. But no, I couldn't get the same amount of tables on this. It's not, when you take away a 3 foot, when you have a 3 foot corridor in the middle of 5 feet, you're
okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just, I have to keep walking.
Space to walk.
Right. And that's what kills it. And
3 feet.
Right. And then I can't have them. Then I've got all these doors. You can kind of see some of these we're adding the nanowall system or the overhead doors so that we're getting the indoor-outdoor ventilation through our entire space. So in a lot of this building, there are 10, 20, 40 feet of this deck will have openings to indoor space, so that I can't put tables right in that entryway, if you will, like right up against it. So I'm a little bit crunched for space, if you will.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions from board members? Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak?
If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand.
Hi, this is Alicia Leglin, Hodgson Russ. I'm here with Chris. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes. I can.
Okay, great.
And Alicia, I'm just going to clarify. If you're representing the applicant for the project, I think you're in the project time, not a member of the public time. So
okay.
I would.
I'll be very quick then.
But I would steer this to you're representing the applicant as their counsel. You're not a member of the public responding to. I don't mean that in a criticism. I mean from a matter of conducting the meeting. I think this is not part of the public comment. You're more than welcome to testify on behalf of the applicant. That's fine. I want to make sure we're differentiating between public comment and from the applicant's perspective. So let's just decouple those. And if you want to provide perspective from the applicant, please proceed.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Okay.
So I just wanted to note a couple things that Chris had mentioned, just kind of support them and supplement them. So one thing I think it's important to keep note of is, as far as the substantiality determination, as that element is for the area variance, it's important to look at the overall impact to the community when determining whether or not the requested variance is substantial. And as Chris had mentioned, it is the overall impact to the community is minimal, as he went through in his presentation. So it's overall impact to the community that really drives that determination, and that should be kept in mind. And then, as Chris had mentioned, with the county board's determination, so they had noted a few things. A couple of their responses said that the city should consider and make certain considerations, and
I think we lost her.
Yeah, I can't.
Okay. Why don't we can certainly accept additional items to the record for this. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
You said city, you cut off at city can make certain considerations. I think we lost her again.
Yeah.
Why don't we move to public comment? And if there is when there's an opportunity for rebuttal, we can have you come back for the applicant and council to come back for that that rebuttal portion and incorporate the responses there.
Perfect.
We do have one member of the public, so thank you for bearing with us. What fun technology is. So let's see if we have any members of the public that would like to speak on or behalf of, on or against the project.
Should be all set now.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Would you please state your name, address, and for the record?
Sure. My name is John Ducharme, and I'm an attorney for Surpass Chemical. I, again, am here to submit Surpass's opposition to this project. We've been through this before. I'm going to rely on, basically what we have submitted in opposition to the project. I do want to point out, and I would, that on December 16, 2021, the Albany County Planning Board did issue its recommendation that you disapprove the Druthers pending project. And I implore you to follow the Albany County Planning Board's recommendation. This does present a change in the character of the neighborhood, which is undesirable, especially for Surpass. I want to emphasize that under the city's USDO, this board is expressly charged with protecting the continued viability of the existing industrial uses that are included in this area, which would include Surpass Chemical. The Albany County Planning Board asks that you consider this undesirable change to the character of the neighborhood. Surpass has been operating its chemical company in this neighborhood for over 100 years. On any given day, between 10 and 30 tractor trailers travel in and out of Surpass's driveway. They travel up and down Bridge Street. They are loud, they emit diesel exhaust. It was Druthers who elected to construct and operate its indoor brewery, restaurant, and bar at this location. Druthers is now proposing to construct an exterior deck within feet of Bridge Street and Surpass's driveway. Druthers staff will work on this existing exterior deck and serve up to 60 patrons. Druthers is in essence asking to create an exterior roadside cafe in the midst of an industrial area. And I implore the board to take a hard look at the inherent dangers of permitting both Druthers staff to work on this deck, as well as the public to drink and dine and walk in close proximity to Bridge Street. In its December 16, 2021 recommendation, the Albany County Planning Board asked that you address the public health and safety concerns presented by the proposed construction of Druthers' exterior deck in dangerously close proximity to the industrial tractor trailer route. They also note that the proposed ADA compliant ramp, which is to be located next to Druthers' Scale House driveway, potentially exposes customers on the deck to heavy industrial traffic containing hazardous materials from diesel exhaust. During Chris Martell's lengthy presentation on December 8, 2021, he made reference to and read from a written opinion he received from someone he purported to be an air quality engineer. He hasn't presented that to the board, and I would ask that the board require Mr. Martell to submit that written report so we can review it and comment on it. In making its determination, the board must consider whether there are any viable alternatives to address the harm Druthers seeks to address with its variance. Druthers claims that it's losing money, but they haven't submitted any dollars and cents proof in the record establishing the need for this exterior deck to remain profitable. They basically are saying that they just want to make more money, and they want to make more money at to the detriment of Surpass Chemical. In making its determination, the board must consider whether Druthers' requested variance is substantial. I submit to you that Druthers' request for a variance to permit it to construct a large exterior deck to service up to 60 additional patrons is substantial. They're expanding the restaurant by 60 additional patron seats. There is no proof in the record that the proposed deck constitutes the minimum variance needed to address any alleged difficulty Druthers faces, because we don't know what the shortfall of their finances are. There's no dollars and cents proof in the record at all. And in making its determination, the board must consider whether Druthers' alleged difficulty is self-created. And I remind you that during Mr. Martell's June 23, 2021 presentation to the BZA, he, an experienced attorney, conceded that any such difficulty was 100% self-created. So in conclusion, I would, on behalf of Surpass, ask you to follow the Albany County Planning Board's recommendation and deny these applications. It's just simply unfair to require Surpass to change its long existing business operations to accommodate Druthers. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. I appreciate your comments, and we certainly, I believe you've submitted a number of materials to the record, so we definitely have those as part of the record. So appreciate your taking the time to join us this evening. Do we have any other public comments before rebuttal? Okay, hearing none, the applicants and council have 5 minutes to respond to comments in rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. I guess just beginning responding to Mr. Ducharme. The first point I'd like to make is I still can't figure out how we are changing the operation at Surpass Chemical. What we have right now is a drive up and down Bridge Street, and there's cars parked on both sides of Bridge Street with pedestrians walking down the middle of the street. If my project is approved, now we've got sidewalks on both sides of the street, crosswalks at the top of the street, a less narrow roadway for which Surpass can operate in. And right now, as people go up and down our staircase, like they're in the same position that they would be if they were on a deck. So it's very difficult to make the argument that it's going to be less safe from a pedestrian use of Bridge Street situation following the building of our deck. I mean, it's one has people walking on sidewalks, and the other has people walking in the middle of the street. One has a narrow passageway for which trucks can pass in. The other has a very wide passageway. Okay, so that brings us to how dangerous is it for our patrons and our staff to work on a deck? Mr. Ducharme mentioned between 10 and 30 trucks will be going by in a day. I imagine it takes someone like 10 seconds for a truck to pass. So out of a 9-hour shift, we're talking about 5 minutes worth of time where trucks are going to be going past our location on Bridge Street. Mr. Ducharme also mentioned that I should bring forward a written report. I emailed someone I know who has worked in air quality. He's a mechanical engineer. I asked him, have you ever seen anything like this? He's like, no, this is my take when I've done this before in garages and things of that nature. Okay. I'm not the one who said it was dangerous to be out there. Mr. Ducharme did. When he all of a sudden, without any evidence whatsoever, other than these vehicles have diesel engines, he mentioned, oh, well, it's going to be in excess of OSHA standards. Well, I don't know what the OSHA standard is. I don't know what kind of diesel exhaust is being like thrown into the environment. I'm not sure at what levels. None of that was provided. All I got was Mr. Ducharme's conclusion that it would most likely violate OSHA standards. Okay, so if Mr. Ducharme wants to prove that it would be dangerous, I would ask him to submit an expert testimony showing what type of vehicle it is and what the impact is. Because right now, all I've got is an unsupported allegation. Finally, again, if at any point Surpass Chemical believes that this is too dangerous to operate on, they have an alternative available to them without any investment. They can literally just go right around the block and avoid the Druthers area altogether. I'm not saying that they have to, because I believe that once we put in this deck, we'll have a very safe operating environment. But to the extent that they disagree and they don't want to spew diesel exhaust onto folks, all they need to do is drive around the block. It's a real stretch in my mind to say that we are going to negatively impact their business by making these improvements. I would also point out that if we decided we wanted to take off the side of our building, take off the roof, and just have it be open air, there'd be nothing wrong with that from a building code perspective. I mean, this is just trying to find an answer to lost profits and an ongoing health crisis that is crippling the restaurant industry. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you for the rebuttal. I appreciate all the comments and material that has been submitted on behalf of this case. We have two potential actions before us tonight. One is a declaration of lead agency, and the other is determination on seeker. I would like to defer on the determination of seeker. That'll give us an opportunity to review the materials that have been submitted and take any additional materials regarding this project into consideration. Do we have any wishes of the board as it relates to declaring lead agency?
I can make a motion to adopt a resolution declaring us the Albany Zoning Board lead agency and the seeker as.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we have any abstentions or any against? Hearing none, motion carries. So I would like to review before we make a seeker determination and consideration of some additional facts which have been presented on this case. The board is not going to take any action here tonight as a wait for any potential additional comments or supplement to the record. So I thank the applicant and the folks from Surpass for taking the time to share their thoughts with us tonight, and the public record for this project will remain open for the opportunity to supplement the record. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our next case is project 00414. That's 875 New Scotland Avenue for Stewart Shop. This is an application modification of existing use variance to modify existing use variance to allow stewards to expand their hours from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. If I'm doing my math correctly, that's 2 additional hours per day. So with that, I'll hand it to staff.
Yep, and we have the applicant on the call.
Great.
And you should be able to talk now.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
We can. Thank you for joining us.
Perfect. How's everyone?
We're doing well.
Good. So My name's Tyler Fronte, here from Sturt Shops tonight to discuss our proposal and why we're in front of this ZBA tonight. So per your conversation you just had and mentioned, we're here to extend our hours of operation as we are a key part of the community, and we constantly listen and adapt our business to the community needs and wants as we can. The requests have been coming in for quite some time for opening up a little earlier in the morning, as well as opening or staying open a little later at night. Nearby patrons of our shop are, a mix of different backgrounds, from nurses, doctors, emergency, response, police, fire, governmental workers. So, they were talking to our partners in the shop, and that's why we're here tonight, to see if we can extend our hours from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Do we have any questions from our board members? Well, they're thinking of a few. I guess I'll ask. I do have a couple. Right now, these are the hours in which the shop is open. Are there delivery times or times where employees will be at the facility, or the facility will be in use other than these particular times? And does the modification in opening and closing the property impact those other elements, such as delivery or stocking or other sorts of non-customer service related activities?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of deliveries, there will be no change. Typically, our partners in the shop will get there probably 20 minutes to a half hour before the shift, get the store open, make sure everything's functioning properly, and there will be no impact at those times, because the shop is closed, and deliveries will maintain within the existing hours today.
Perhaps a remedial question, but does this change in hours of operation change any other business elements, like operating the pumps or turning on signs, any other impacts upon the business which may change or make things like odor or noise, or cause any sort of public health impacts in that regard?
No, I mean, everything's going to be operating the same way. Obviously, lighting will be on at 5 a.m. versus 6 a.m. It's on, it's downlit LED, so there's no spillover to neighboring parcels today. As I said, the shop's been there for 38 years now. This one was rebuilt in 2010, so this operating for 12 years. And we just did a remodel there, again, to adapt and update the facility. So no, there won't be any other impact than what's there today. And the neighbors, around the property who I tried to reach out to, and if there's any on this meeting, I'd be happy to talk with them as well if there's a public hearing setting. But that being said, there should be no other change.
Do we have any other questions from board members before we go to public comment?
Can you describe a little bit like the area the store is in, and like, are there other businesses around, and do you know what their hours of operations are that are in the vicinity of this location? And also, you mentioned that your customers have been asking for this change, and that like doctors and nurses. So is that like, is the main clients that are asking for this change are doctors and nurses? Can you expand a little bit more on that? Sorry.
Yeah, so great question. So this is at New Scotland and Whitehall Road. It's more in a residential setting. It's mixed use neighborhood edge, so there is neighborhood behind there. Most of the new property owners behind there have been living next to the shop for a period of time. It has been existing. There's two other gas stations, I would say, down the road. There's a Lukoil and a Sunoco further down, probably a quarter of a mile to a mile on the same side of the road. The Lukoil, I believe, is open to about 11 p.m., but I don't know what time they open per se. I could find out for you. And in terms of clientele, again, this came through some of the community members, so those were just an example. So there's contractors, there's DPW workers, there's a mix. Again, we're passed by. We try to service the neighborhood the best we can, the local community, and again, that's why we're here tonight, is to, the request is made. The common council representative had some constituents reach out to him, and that's why we're here.
And so following up on that, the common council representative for the neighborhood is in support of this change. Do you know?
I have had a few conversations with him. I'm not too sure if he's on the call tonight. He told me he did submit a letter claiming his support. So I believe that was on the city website.
Okay, thank you. And I think if you could, get the information about the other businesses and their operating hours, that would be great.
Yep, I can tell you right now if you give me 2 minutes.
Thank you.
So the Lukoil hours of operation are 5 a.m. to 12 a.m.
Sam, do you have any, members of the public that have signed up to speak?
If anybody would like to speak, please raise your hand.
I have the Sunoco hours too. They are.
Yeah, we don't have anybody.
They are 5 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Thank you.
Hearing no members of the public that want to speak, we did provide the opportunity for notice. We do have some, I'm looking at trying to look for any additional materials, but I'm not seeing any. Do we have any wishes of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the request to change hours of operation on either side of the morning and the evening.
Again,
Hearing a motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstain? None? All right, motion carries. Thank you for taking the time to present with us tonight.
Thank you.
With that, do we have any other business before the BZA, or does staff have any updates to share?
That's it for tonight. Unless
All right.
council has anything, I think we're good.
Thank you.
I will mention Brad is looking at scheduling. Sorry, Brad, I know I'm extending this. Brad is looking to do an update on changes to the USDO. So keep a look in your email for a potential time to get educated on some of the new changes to the USDO and how it may impact us. And I will keep it right there and zip my lip.
I have some things to say about the the stated jurisdiction of the county planning board too, as we. So I'll
I'm
bring
sure
that
you
all
do.
here.
Let's, we'll have a beer or something someday. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.